Now the foam is pretty easy to work with. I think I can trim it down probably with a little utility blade. I said the whole idea is to get it an area built to where I can pour epoxy in that will form the hard outer layer of the wheel. So we'll work on this for a few minutes. I'm not going to video all of it, and I'll come back and show you the wheel once I've got this trimmed down. I'm using a Dremel with a little small honing bit to remove some of the foam. Also, what I want to do is create a little bit of a cavity up under the old rim of the wheel so the new epoxy will go under it and support that better. And then I'll go back and kind of clean up these edges the best that I can so there'll be a nice bond. But I want a good layer of epoxy along this edge. I don't want it too thick because it'll take so much, but mainly I just want to make sure that the new epoxy bonds everywhere with the old rim of the wheel. So I'm just about through cleaning it out, but just thought I'd give you a little bit of a glimpse of what I'm doing here. As you see, I'm getting under the old rim at least a quarter to a half an inch. And I'm cleaning up the edge where the epoxy will actually bond. I'm preparing to attach the mold to the wheel and then to get ready and pour the final epoxy to mold the missing section of the wheel. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of, if you hold it, a little bit of Vaseline on the inside of the mold because I want this to be able to release from the epoxy once it's set up. I've also bored a hole through the wheel, and there was actually a hole here before that had been filled in, which undoubtedly this is how they injected the wheel. So it was in a very convenient spot. So I've got that all the way through, and once I attach the mold, then I'll mix the epoxy, put the coloring in, let gravity take over and try to pour as much epoxy in this as I can. Hopefully I can get it full all at one time. So I'm going to coat the Vaseline and then get the mold attached. I'm not going to video all that because it will take a few minutes, too long to video. So now the Vaseline is on the inside of the plastic mold. I've already marked exactly where this goes on the wheel. So placement will be pretty easy, and you can see the void area and the hole that I'm going to pour the epoxy in. So what I'm going to do now is tape this up real tight, pull it down as tight as I can to try to make sure that we don't get epoxy going in places that we don't want it. But I've gone ahead and taped up parts of the wheel that, the white stripe for example, parts of the wheel that I don't want the epoxy on, just in case it overflows. I'll at least keep it from sticking anywhere except where it needs to. So now to tape it up. Part of my decision process now, and I really am having a difficult time making up my mind, is whether to go with the 5-minute epoxy or go with this 24-hour epoxy. I've considered going with a 5-minute epoxy and putting less hardener in it. I'm a little concerned about that. I'm probably going to go with the 24-hour epoxy. And the reason for that is this epoxy has a long way to travel to get into every little crevice that I want it to fill the hole. I know this epoxy right here will do that. This one I'm concerned may set up before I can get this hole filled, and I would just get a partial fill on this. So it's kind of a toss up as far as which way to go, but right now I'm leaning toward going with the slower reacting epoxy. So I'm gonna get that mixed up, put the black color in it so it'll come out right, and then we'll go live in just a few minutes when we're actually pouring it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So hopefully we've put equal parts of the part A into part B, one being the rosin and one being the hardener. I'm going to go ahead and add some color. A few drops, and now we're mixing it up. With this epoxy, we actually have to let it stand for about 10 minutes after mixing it. We have to just let it set. Again, it's a very, very slow setting epoxy, but it penetrates extremely well. The other epoxy, if I let it set for 10 minutes, would already be hard as a rock. So we're going to let this set for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to try to pour it out of this container into this hole and see if we can get it to completely fill the void area. Okay, it's now time to attempt to fill the void. I'll try to film this, but more important is going to be my ability to actually get it done without making a mess. Let's see. Do it like this. There we go. I know you can't see the hole, but you can still see. I'm pouring the epoxy directly over the hole, and I'm going to have to wait for it to soak in, or not soak in, but for it to actually go down into the hole. I've taped up all of the wheel around the hole so we can make sure that none of the epoxy goes anywhere that we don't want it to go. This is going to take a few minutes, maybe longer than a few minutes, but I think you can already see the epoxy starting to fill. Well, the best that I can tell, I have completely filled the mold, the missing part of the tire, with epoxy. Difficult to tell, but the fill hole, which is right here, the epoxy is no longer going down in it, which pretty well means that either there's an air bubble or there's just no more void area. So I'm going to stay with it for a few more minutes and have a little bit more epoxy left just in case it goes down. If it does, I'll fill it. It's kind of like one shot at this thing to get it right. Once this epoxy sets up, which is a long process, about 24 hours, if there's a void area, then it's, you know, I'm just going to have to patch it, and I'm hoping to avoid that. I'm glad I went with a slow working epoxy. This has been about a 10 or 15 minute process. The other epoxy would have already set up by now, which is what I was afraid of. So even though I hate it's going to take so long, this is the safest way to do it to make sure we get the tire filled completely. So hopefully the next part of the video will be removing the mold, removing all the tape from the tire, and trying to see what we have. Well, it's now time for the big reveal. I said earlier that this was a 24-hour epoxy I was using. It takes 24 hours for it to cure, but it actually will set up in probably a couple hours. So I just wanted to correct that before I went any further. What I did not use was the 5-minute epoxy, which would have set up far too quickly for me to have filled this void area in the wheel. I needed an epoxy that would work a little bit slower. So now I've removed all of the tape that was on the wheel. This was for two reasons. One was to secure the mold, to keep it from moving. The other one was to protect all the areas of the wheel that I did not want the epoxy to flow on accidentally. So I didn't want to have to figure out how to clean up epoxy off of this white wall, which frankly couldn't have been done. So anyway, I've got all the tape removed. Remember, I put Vaseline on the inside of the mold, so it should, the epoxy would not stick to it. So it's now time to remove the mold and see if I've got any bad places or if we got a good pour. So here we go. And first impressions are pretty darn good. A little bit of a close-up here. That is the area that was repaired. You can see a little bit of a crease line right there. That's where, this is the new epoxy and this is the old wheel. So this is where the hole was. So in order to do away with that crease line and smooth this up just a little bit, all I have to do is take my Dremel or a little bit of sandpaper and sand it. That will also degloss the epoxy and kind of blend it and make it match with the rest of the wheel. And I'll also dull down this epoxy where I glued the joint back together. Once I do that, Ollie's wheel will be ready to put back on and be ready for Maggie this weekend. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, well, actually, I was going to say give it a big thumbs up. I will anyway, but there'll be one more video, and that's when I put at least one more segment to this video, and that's when I put the wheel back on Ollie, and maybe the final segment will be when Maggie gets on Ollie and rides him around the house. I'm going to put a few finishing touches on the wheel, primarily with a Dremel. I'm going to just smooth out the overlapping area where the new epoxy met the old wheel, and any other little touch-up that needs to be done, and then I'll finish it up with some medium sandpaper. And you can see the difference. The epoxy is kind of glossy compared to the wheel, so a little bit of sanding will dull that. And hopefully when I'm finished, it'll be very difficult to even tell that this wheel has been patched.